my keys are in possession and my wheels are chocked. I'm going to check underneath for any puddles from anything leaking inside the engine. Check the windshield for any cracks or illegal stickers. And I'll check the seal around the window to make sure it's not cracked or dry rotted and it's all intact. I'll check the wipers, make sure that they're intact and snug to the window. I'll check that the grill is free from debris and that the bumper is intact and mounted securely, and that the license plate is clean, visible, and mounted securely, and both bolts are present without any rust. Check that my headlights and my blinkers are clean, not cracked or broken, and not missing. And my clearance lights up top are amber in color. Make sure that they are not missing, cracked, or broken. Here, I'll check the radiator. Make sure that it is mounted securely. All nuts and bolts are present, no rust, and it is not cracked, broken, or leaking. My upper and lower radiator hoses, I will check that all the clamps are present. It's not cracked, no sign of sponginess, they're not leaking. The exhaust system, I would check. Clamps are present, it's not leaking, there's no signs of soot, and that it connects to the muffler, which is back here. Check that that is mounted securely, nuts and bolts are present, no rust, and that is not leaking. My transmission fluid, I would check with a dipstick. I'll remove it, wipe it off, reinsert it, and then remove it to check the level. I'll check that my alternator is mounted securely to the frame. All nuts and bolts are present with no rust, and it is not cracked or broken. That is belt driven. I would check the center of the belt can have no more than 3/4 inch of play, and then I'll check the condition of the belt, make sure it's not cracked or frayed. And my water pump connected to the fan clutch, I would check it is mounted securely, nuts and bolts are present, no rust, it's not cracked or broken, and it is not leaking, and that is also belt driven. I'll check that the belt again can have no more than 3/4 inch of play at the center, and it is not cracked or frayed. Here, I'll check the spring hangers, make sure they are mounted securely, all nuts and bolts are present, no rust, it's not cracked or broken. My leaf springs, I would check that none are missing and none are cracked or broken. My shock absorber, I would check is mounted, nuts and bolts are present, no rust, it's not cracked or broken, it is not leaking. My U-bolts, I would check, make sure they're present, not rusted, cracked or broken. I would check my slack adjuster and push rod, make sure when the brakes are not applied and tugged down by hand, it could have no more than 1 inch of play, and when the brakes are applied, it'll be a 90-degree angle. And I'll check that my adjuster nut is present and is not rusted. My brake chamber, I would check is mounted securely, all nuts and bolts are present, not without any rust, and it's not cracked or broken or leaking. I would check that the brake lines are connected properly and they're not cracked or leaking. I would check the brake pads, make sure that they're all wearing evenly and the brake drum is not cracked or broken. And I'll check the inner and outer wall of the tire for any cuts or bulges. The tread on the front tires can have no less than 4/32 of an inch. And I would check the inflation of the tire with an air gauge. I would check the rim, make sure that it is snug to the tire and it is not cracked and there's no illegal welds. I would check that all lug nuts are present and they're not loose and they're not rusted. I would check that the valve stem and cap is present, and I would check the hub oil seal level. There's the glass. This is my driver's side. I would check my air hoses, make sure they're connected properly, they're not cracked, they're not leaking, and that they connect to the air compressor, which is at the back of the engine. I would check that that is mounted securely, all nuts and bolts are present, it's not cracked or broken, and that is gear driven. I would check my power steering reservoir. I would check the level by removing the dipstick, wiping it off, reinserting it, and then removing it, and I'll check that it is not leaking, and that it is mounted securely, nuts and bolts are present. My power steering hoses, I would check that all clamps are present, it's not cracked or leaking, and that it connects to the power steering pump, which is also at the back of the engine. I'll check that that is mounted securely, nuts and bolts are present, no rust, it's not cracked or broken, and that is also gear driven. My coolant reservoir, I would check the level just by seeing it's at the proper level, and I would check that it is mounted securely, all nuts and bolts are present, no rust, and I'll check the lines, make sure that they're connected properly, not cracked or leaking, and that the reservoir itself is not leaking. I'll check the left radiator hose, make sure that the clamps are present, it's not cracked, it's not leaking. My steering arm is not cracked or broken. Check the U-joints, make sure they're properly greased. Steering gearbox, I will check, is mounted securely. Nuts and bolts are present without any rust. It's not cracked or broken. The pitman arm is mounted securely. Nuts and bolts are present. It's not cracked or broken, and all cotter pins are present. And the drag link, I'll check that the cotter pins are present. It's not cracked or broken, and it connects properly to the upper and the lower control arm. And then check that that is mounted. Nuts and bolts are present. Cotter pins, and it is not cracked or broken. And I will check the spring hangers, leaf springs, shock absorber, and the U-bolts, same way I did on the other side, and the brakes. And I'll check the tire and everything else, same way I did on the other side. Okay, the engine oil dipstick, I forgot. I would check the level by removing it, wiping it off, reinserting it, and then removing it to make sure that it has that proper level. My driver's side, I'll check my mirror, make sure that it is mounted securely. All nuts and bolts are present at the top without any rust, and that my glass is not broken and it is clean and visible. I'll check that my door properly opens on the outside. I'll check that my hinges, I'll make sure all the bolts are present without any rust, and the seal around the door I will check is not cracked or dry rotted. I will check my steps, make sure all nuts and bolts are present without any rust, and they are mounted securely, and there's no debris that would cause me to fall. A battery box, I would check is mounted securely, nuts and bolts are present, and I'll check that both batteries inside are mounted properly, and that the battery lines connect snug to the terminal and that they are not cracked or leaking. My fuel tank, I would check is mounted securely. All nuts and bolts are present, no rust. I would check that it is not leaking or dented in any way. I would remove the cap to check the rubber seal inside, make sure it's not dry rotted and intact, and I would put that back on there. I would check the overall side of the vehicle for any bulges from any cargo inside. I would check to make sure all my DOT reflectors are present. They are red and silver in color. And I would check that my clearance lights up top, on the middle, and in the front are amber in color, and in the rear it is red in color. I'll make sure that they're not missing, cracked, or broken. Down here, I would check my primary and secondary air tanks. Make sure that they are mounted securely, nuts and bolts are present. They are not leaking, and the safety release valve is closed, and it's no damage to the tank. And I'll check that the air lines connected to them are connected properly, and they are not cracked or leaking. I would check the frame, make sure there's no cracks or illegal welds. I would check that all my U-bolts are present, make sure that they're not broken, not cracked or broken, and they're not rusted. And I'll check all my cross members, make sure they're all present and not cracked or broken. And I'll check the floor of the vehicle for any holes that would cause me to fall from the inside. And in my drive shaft, I would check it's free from debris. It is not cracked or broken, and the U-joints are all properly greased. Again, the spring hangers, I would check are mounted securely. All nuts and bolts are present, no rust, it's not cracked or broken. My leaf springs, I would check that none are missing and that they are not cracked or broken. My torque bar, I would check for any it's not cracked or broken, there's no illegal welds. And I would check my U-bolts back here, make sure that they are both present and that they are not rusted, cracked, or broken. My brake chamber, I would check is not leaking, it is mounted securely, not cracked or broken, and all nuts and bolts are present without any rust, and that the brake lines are connected properly. They're not cracked and they're not leaking. And I'll check my slack adjuster, my push rod in the back, same way it is in the front. When the brakes are not applied and checked by hand, it can have no more than an inch of play. And when the brakes are applied, it would be at a 90-degree angle. I would check the inner and outer wall of both tires for any cuts or bulges. The tread on the rear tires can have no less than 2/32 of an inch. And I'll check the inflation of the tires with a gauge. And I would check the drums, brake drums and pads of the tires. Make sure the drums are not cracked or broken and the pads are wearing evenly all the way around. And I would check that there's no debris between the tires. I would check the rim of the back tire. Make sure all lug nuts are present. They're not loose, they're not rusted. And I'll check make sure there's no cracks or illegal welds in the rim. the rear wheel seal level, and I would check that the valve stem and cap are present. I would check that the mud flap is mounted securely, both nuts and bolts are present without any rust, and that it is at the proper level. Back here, I would check the clearance lights up top. They are red in color. I would check that none are missing, cracked, or broken. My DOT reflectors, I would check that they are all present, and they are red and silver in color. I would check that my backing lights, brake lights, and blinkers and parking lights are all present. They're not cracked or broken. I would check that my license plate is mounted securely. Both bolts are present without any rust, and it is visible, and there's no illegal stickers. And I would check that my tag light is present and not cracked or broken. That is white in color. I would check the lift gate, make sure that it is no nuts or bolts are missing, it's not damaged or cracked, and it is not leaking hydraulic fluid. And I would check my door, make sure all the latches and the hinges are present, all nuts and bolts are present without any rust, and that the door properly opens and closes. And here, I would check everything on this side the same way they're on the other side, with the exception of the door and the steps. I would check the all latches and hinges are present, the bolts are present without any rust, and that the door properly opens and closes. And I'll check that the steps properly are secure in the up position, and that they fold all the way down with all nuts and bolts are present, and there's no debris and no rust. And in here, I would check the windshield washer fluid, so by checking to make sure and that is not leaking. And I would check the door, steps, mirror, same way I did on the other side. And here, I would check that my door properly opens and closes from the inside, that my window rolls up and down without any problem. I would check that I have my fully charged ABC fire extinguisher, my 3 reflective triangles under the seat, and spare fuses in the box. I would turn the electric on. As I turn it on, I would check that my ABS light comes on and then goes off. That indicates that is working properly. I would check that all my gauges are working. My fuel gauge lets me know how much fuel I have. Make sure that it's at the proper level, which is full. My primary and secondary air gauges, I would check that they are working. And my water temperature level, I would check that is working properly. Right now it's cold, but it would be at normal. That should be it for the gauges. The electric on, I would check that my horn works. I would check that the wipers work, and that the washer fluid works. The blinker indicators work. Right blinker, they all work on the dash. Left blinker, high beams, and hazard lights. And I'll check that all my dash lights are working on the screen and everything. I would check that my window, I would check from the inside, make sure it's not cracked and it's visible and it's clean, and there are no illegal stickers. I would check my mirror adjusters. I would check that they work properly, and I'll make sure that my mirrors are properly adjusted before I drive. I would check that my my heater works. It does. And my defroster, I would make sure it works, which it does. Alright. I would check when the vehicle is turned off that the steering wheel does not turn more than 10 inches in either direction. And now I'll turn the vehicle on. With the vehicle on, the steering wheel should move freely in both directions, which it does. And now I would check the service brake of the vehicle. By doing that, I would pull forward at about 5 miles per hour and lightly hit the brakes, make sure that the vehicle stops smoothly and does not pull in either direction. I would check the parking brake, which I could do now. I would check that when the parking brake is applied, it is not leaking any air. And I'll put the vehicle in drive and try to move forward. Make sure that it does not go anywhere, which it does not. Put it back in gear. And I would, before I begin the leakage test, I would make sure that both tanks are full. And by doing so, I will lightly hit the accelerator, and the air compressor should cut off at around 125 psi. Alright, the air compressor cut off, and both my air tanks are full at 125 psi. Now I will turn the vehicle off, turn the electric on, and release the parking brake, and let it rest up against the truck. And first, I will do the leakage test. I will hold my foot on the brake for 1 minute, and the air tank should not leak more than 3 psi during that minute. So I would let the examiner know that it did not leak more than 3 psi and that is working properly. Next, I will fan the brakes to test that the warning light and that the buzzer works. And by doing that, I'll fan the brake, and when the tanks go to drop to about 60 psi, that's when the buzzer and the light should come on. As you see, the warning light is on and the buzzer is on at around 60 psi. I will continue to fan the brakes, and at around 40 to 20 psi, the parking brake should come back on. Alright, so at 40 to 20 psi, the parking brake has applied, showing that all the safety features work properly. And that would complete the air brake test. And lastly, I would check that all my lights, blinkers, hazard lights, and high beams work from the outside. Alright, lastly, I would make sure that all my lights are working, both headlights, my clearance lights up top, and my mirror lights are working. I checked that my blinker here is working, and all my back lights are working, and clearance lights up top, and my tag light. I see that that's working. The left blinker, I'll make sure it's working on both sides. Back, it's working properly. Side. And blink on the front, make sure it's working properly. Here. The right blinker is working. And here. On the side is working. And in the back, I'll do the hazards. Check, make sure the hazard lights are working in the back, and in the front they're working. And then lastly should be the high beams. And the high beams I'll check are working properly. Yeah, lastly I would ask the examiner to assist me to make sure that the braking lights and the reverse lights are working. So I'm going to hop in. The examiner would have indicated with a thumbs up if both lights, if the hazards, the brake lights and the reverse lights are working properly, and that would conclude the pre-trip.